had tears in my eyes. I mean, I've read it twice. I'm not reading it right now. I'm actually retelling it.
Oh my
And it still gets me,
yeah.
you know, and I have goosebumps, and I feel like crying, and I look at my husband, and I totally see that he got
Wow.
emotional also, like, from my brief retelling of that. Yeah, that just once again to compliment you as a writer.
Hello, everyone. I am Danny J. Norwell, and you are tuned into the very first Snapshots of Spain book chat. If you somehow made your way here without knowing what's going on, I will quickly catch you up to speed. Basically, next Wednesday is the start of the Snapshots of Spain re-release. And so on that day, the first 3 stories that are being re-released will become available. But to kick off this extravaganza, today I am really excited to share with you about Grandad. So this is actually the very first novella in the collection, and this is one that is available right now. So if you would like to get your hands on a copy of this, it's completely free. Just go on to my website. You have to sign up for my mailing list, and of course I hope that you enjoy my newsletters and my emails and you want to stick around, but you can unsubscribe at any time. So there are really no strings attached. Do go and get yourself a copy of Grandad. I think you'll be really glad that you did. So that is available at dannyjnorwell.com/free novella. And of course, I have this link in my stories and bio as well. But if you'd like to know a little bit more about Grandad before you get your copy, you've come to the right place, because today I'm going to be sharing with you a short reading from the beginning of this story, and then I am super excited to invite on indie author Elena Carter to join us. She was an early reader of Snapshots of Spain, and she has told me from the very beginning that she loves Grandad, so I cannot wait to hear her thoughts and just for us to share why we think you will love it as well. So thank you so much to those of you who are joining live. It's wonderful to see you here. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to jump right in to reading to you from Grandad. I think it's difficult to see with the glare, but here's my beautiful cover, designed by Yaf Al, who's also here today. Thank you for coming. Yeah, let me take a drink of water, and then I'll share with you the beginning of the Grandad novella. Okay. It's 4 o'clock on a March afternoon in San Vicente de Raspieg, Alicante, and Jorge's playing in his room with the door open. It's that special part of the day when they've finished lunch, but Mommy hasn't told him it's time to do his homework yet. This particular afternoon, however, is when the fateful phone call happens. Jorge takes notice of the phone ringing because it doesn't happen often, but it's also nothing to be concerned about. At least that's what he thinks at first. Quickly, the phone call starts to sound scary. Usually, Mommy's phone conversations take place in Spanish, the language of the country they call home. Today, Mommy responds in her native Estonian and sounds anxious. Despite it being his favorite time of the day, Jorge is easily distracted by Mommy's quick and nervous tone on the phone. At first she's loud, but then she lowers her voice to a whisper, which makes it hard for Jorge to hear. It starts to worry him. He loves Mommy, and so he hopes nothing bad has happened to her. Eventually, unable to focus on his game because he can't tell what's going on over the phone, he tiptoes out to the living room. As soon as Mommy sees him, she drops her eyes and turns her body away from him for a few seconds. When she turns back, she has already hung up the phone. "¿Quién era, Mommy?" he asks. Mommy doesn't respond right away, so he doesn't know who is on the phone. "I need to talk to your daddy for a minute, ¿vale? Un minuto, corazón." Mommy always calls Jorge corazón when she knows she's being evasive with him. Jorge doesn't yet know the meaning of the word evasive, but he can recognize the feeling. It irritates him that she uses a term of endearment to mean my heart when she's hurting his heart the most. Jorge waits, leaning against the couch as Mommy grazes past him to knock on the door of Daddy's study. She purposely leaves the door open to feign that she's not being secretive, but their tones are so hushed that it doesn't matter that the door is open. Jorge can't hear what they're talking about anyway. He just waits, his Paw Patrol stuffed animal hanging out of his right hand. The firefighting Dalmatian's ear brushes the floor. Then Mommy comes out of the study with Daddy right behind her. They both look sad. Their faces are tightly pulled together. It looks painful the way they're trying not to let the sad show through. It shows through all the same. What's wrong? Jorge asks, his eyes darting from Mommy to Daddy, not sure which one will be brave enough to share the bad news with him. Jorge doesn't have any idea what the news will be, but he can tell it will be bad. Daddy lets out a long sigh. Come on, sport, let's sit down on the couch and have a chat. Daddy's voice sounds strained. He's trying to sound normal, but Jorge can easily tell the difference. Even though Daddy is the one who suggests it, neither he nor Jorge move. It's Mommy who takes the initiative and leaves them all to sit down in the living room. Once they're all on the couch, Jorge's sitting expectantly between the two of them so he can swivel toward whomever will finally tell him what's going on. Mommy explains, Corazon, we don't want you to feel scared, but we have some bad news. So there you go, a little bit of intrigue as to what the bad news will be, but I'm sure that Elena and I will get into this a little bit more. So I am going to invite her to join us. It's been a long time since I've done this, so hopefully I will. And hopefully she'll join us in a moment. But yeah, as I said, those of you who are here, if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask us. Hi there, how are you?
Everything works.
It's wonderful. This is the first time we're getting to speak in real time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's so great to have you here. And like I was saying before, I felt so much love from you specifically for this story. And so I cannot wait to hear a little bit more about it.
You know, it was so interesting for me to actually reread it because I checked in, I read it for the first time almost a couple years ago, right? That was in 2021. And it's always interesting to come back, you know, to some of the stories that you read before and see if they, you know, if they hit the same target or if they affect you differently in some way. And I can say that maybe I've changed a little bit, my life has changed a little bit, but it still hits the same, you know. I've had the same emotions, I've had the same, first of all, I would love to express my admiration of you as a writer, because I think what impressed me most was how you managed to portray the feelings and emotions and thoughts, you know, in the inner world of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge for me.
So brilliantly, because that is a challenge. That is really a challenge. That's very hard to do, and it's not even about just being a writer. It's about being an adult. Yeah, and like I'm a mom of 2 kids, a toddler and a teenager. Yeah, and it's very hard. You know, it's very hard sometimes to see a different point of view because you look at things from your box, as I usually say. Yeah, you look at things and you feel things and through the filter of being an adult. Yeah. But if you try to start to imagine what's going through that little head now, I'm talking about my little one now, definitely not the oldest. Yeah, and the way they see the world, the way they see their parents, the way they receive the information. Like, again, you know, the things that you were reading the beginning right now, and it gets me every time, you know, I get goosebumps because I really get emotional, you know, in these moments, because this little kid, he sees and feels much more than his parents allow him to see, or they think so. And he's about to learn some bad news. Yeah. And yeah, of course, no spoilers, but yeah, I think that you have conveyed his feelings and his emotions perfectly. And I really enjoyed reading the story, seeing this story through the eyes of a 6-year-old kid.
Oh, that warms my heart so much to hear, because, like I said, it is a challenge. But that's also exactly what I hope to do in my stories, whether it's a 6-year-old kid or in Marianne, it's a woman in her 60s starting a study abroad, or not study, but she does go and study Spanish for the first time in a new country. And like, these are experiences that I haven't necessarily had, but it was such a great experience for me to try and put myself in those positions, and then amazing when readers can have that opportunity as well.
Well, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of talent, I'll tell you for sure.
That makes me feel amazing. Well, I know my main question that I was going to ask you was, what is it about this story that really resonated with you? And I don't know if it's what you've already shared, or if there was anything more about Grandad that sparked something for you.
It was this, of course, first of all, and the little things. When we read something, when we hear or see a story, we always try it on, don't we, as a reader or as a viewer. So we always look for things, for ways in which it is relatable to our own personal situation. So, and I remember that when I was reading for the first time, I was like, oh wow, this is close. I mean, we're talking about a family who's raising a bilingual kid, basically, but also in a third country, like in a third culture, which is exactly the situation that I am in personally. Yeah, because we are raising a bilingual kid, because my native language is Russian, my husband's native language is English, and we're living in Bulgaria.
That's so similar.
He at some point be exposed. So I kind of, I was looking, I was like, okay, what do I learn from this? How are they handling this? Yeah, and also that was so accurate, like sometimes Jorge would miss his mom. No spoilers again, but when he would miss his mom, and some of the fairy tales that she would tell him usually before bedtime, the old Russian fairy tales that she would tell him from memory. And these little things, that show the family's dynamic, and they show the exposure to different cultures. Yeah, that was so very interesting to me. And I was really looking and trying to pick up, maybe little lessons, maybe little hints at, and I was wondering, back then, it's like, how is it going to work out for us? Because, well, back then my son wasn't even 2. Yeah. So he wasn't speaking yet at all, any language. Yeah. He's picking up English now more than Russian, but yeah, we are basically raising a bilingual in a third, in a third culture. So later on, he will be exposed to a third language, and that's a lot to judge.
Absolutely. And it is perfect to chat with you about this, because I think this concept of a third culture kid who's getting all these different cultures coming in, all these different languages coming in, living in a country that's neither of his parents' home country, it is, for a lot of my readers, something that's new and something that they may not have experienced. And so it's also very cool to hear how you did relate to it so much.
A lot, yeah. I love I personally love Spanish. I absolutely adore that language. I haven't learned it yet, shamefully. I learned a little bit way back in high school, but I love it when you use the little, little Spanish words and phrases. Yeah, because sometimes it's like I think did I know that? Does it sound familiar? Do I know that word? If I don't, I learn it. And I absolutely love learning new things. And I love learning about new cultures and new languages through books, through reading. I've always been like that. You know, when as a kid, I had a habit of reading footnotes in books. And I had a plan, actually, of learning as many languages as I can.
Wow, that's incredible.
Which would be mostly French, because I'd read a lot of classic Russian literature, and they love their French. I mean, half the book is written in French. Seriously, yeah. But it is like, you know, it's a like long sentence, but I don't know, many people would probably just skip it. I'd be like, you know, with a pencil and a notebook, like, okay, so this translates to this. Okay,
I love that.
Spoiler alert, I didn't learn French, but I still enjoy doing that in books. And it's just another little thing that books, it's another little treasure that books hold for us, you know. They teach us and they enrich us in so many different ways. And your wonderful stories.
I couldn't agree more, and that was again a challenge, but something that I was very adamant about doing. And I did go back and forward on it because I do also understand, like you were saying, when there's a big chunk of French and you don't speak French, it can get frustrating. And I have had that experience when I'm perhaps not as passionate about you, about all of the languages, not as passionate as you. And so I've read some novels in the past where there was just like paragraphs or lines of another language, and there wasn't a footnote and there wasn't an explanation, and that irritated me. So I tried to do it in a way that there is a glossary at the start of Snapshots of Spain for expressions that get used a lot. But then also when it's dialogue, of course, I wasn't going to put every line of dialogue in the glossary. So it was my intention to, you know, kind of within the paragraph, like you said, a lot of the Spanish, I think a lot of English speakers do know a little bit. And so you'll read it and think, does that mean this? And then you get to the end of the paragraph and you're like, okay, he was asking who was on the phone. I was correct. So that was something I tried to weave in there, and it's nice to hear that hit well.
Yeah, you did absolutely great. It's like, I know what corazon means, yeah, but still I read on after his mom calls him corazon. And then I read later, I'm like, oh, wow, you're just so intricately, you know, you wove it into the explanation. I'm like, wow, that's awesome, because if I didn't know that word, I still would have got it from the text. But it also feels so, it feels genuine, you know, it feels, it gives it this vibe of authenticity, you know, if you're talking about a family that speaks several different languages, and if they only spoke English, all of them, it kind of would have been a little bit strange, right? Yeah, not realistic, let's say. Yeah, but you have like an Estonian word here or there, which got me interested, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what Estonian is like, because, you know, I haven't heard much of it. So yeah, I think it's also one of the reasons why it gives you that immersive experience where you actually feel like, you feel the story, you know. You feel the characters when they stumble upon a problem in their communication, like, you know, later on we have between Jorge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, like, Grandad does end up coming to live with the family, and that it just introduces such a challenge and such a language barrier, because Grandad only speaks Estonian, and that's the one language that Jorge doesn't speak much of. And it's very difficult for this young boy to adapt to this very new experience.
You know what I also loved is how you managed to portray everyone's point of view. I know that Jorge is the hero here. He is the main character, and we see everything through his head. But subtly, also in little different ways, we see exactly how mom feels in this situation, because this situation is hard on everyone. Yeah. It's hard on the granddad. And although it doesn't have many lines, as in lines, we still get to see and feel how he feels in, in this whole setup. And we get to see dad's emotions and his support of mom, but his also his understanding of his son's point of view. Uh, I think that was, again, very, very skillfully done, because I could feel and I could see the perspective of each one, each member of the family. And that was absolutely
well,
amazing.
thank you. Again, that's what I'm hoping to do. So it's so exciting to hear a reader saying that that's what they got out of it. I am taking a look at the time, and I did want to share a quote from your review, because this really, warmed my heart as well. And I'll share it first, and then we'll talk about it. So, when Elena wrote her review of Snapshots of Spain, she said, "It'll play on all the different strings of your soul, making you laugh, making you cry, and sometimes even making you feel like a kid again." And yeah, like I said, I felt so just heartwarmed in this moment when I read this line in particular. And for me, I thought of Grandad when I read this story. And so that's why when I put Grandad available for people to download, I had approached you about using this quote. And so I was just curious, was it really Grandad that you were thinking about when you said this, or was it something about the collection as a whole?
That last part was definitely referring to Grandad. Yeah, the whole collection, absolutely loved it, because every story is different, and every story really makes you experience very, very different emotions. But yeah, this part of when you get to look at a situation through the eyes of a 6-year-old, which is not easy to do when you're, well, in my case, over 40. And we kind of have this, as we adults, as we grow up, we have this default setting of seeing a situation in a different way, through a different filter, let's say. Yeah, so we can look at the situation and say, why is the kid behaving like this in this situation? But he has to be more understanding, or doesn't he see this, or he has to. No, when the way you wrote this story, I'm actually, when I'm reading that, I'm not a mom, I'm not an adult who would be, I don't know, condescending or judgmental, or whatever we can be in those situations, and let's admit it, we are a lot of the times when it comes to watching kids as adults. We have that a lot. Yeah, but I managed to look at it through his eyes, and I understood his feelings, and I was like, well, we all were like that. And you know what, if that little kid inside, if you were put in that situation, that's exactly how you feel, and that's exactly the things that you would do and that you would say, and you will get emotional at some point, and you will want to cry, you will want to say things that you will regret later, because it's okay, because you're a little kid who's not able to process their emotions properly yet. Come on, we don't really do it as adults, right?
True.
What exactly do we expect from a 6-year-old? Yeah, it's all those little reminders that I see in that story.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so cool.
It's very deep. That's the way I see it. It's very deep. There's a lot to reflect on. There's a lot to think about. And there's a lot to learn. And there's a lot to remind yourself. When you read this story, there's a lot to remind yourself about the way you see things, from your perspective as an adult.
Yeah, and it's funny, I hadn't thought about it until you said this, how Grandad doesn't have many lines. It's so true. He barely speaks in this story, and yet, I mean, he's the titular character. This is about Grandad. But I think, yeah, that's the kind of the point, like coming into the family's life and Jorge's life specifically. He is like the tornado. He is the the big thing that changes everything in this little boy's life, and he doesn't even have to be able to communicate with the little boy to send everything into chaos.
Yeah, and the boy doesn't have control over it. The boy is not the decision maker, you know, here. And basically, his life comes crashing down, and he can't do anything about it. Yeah, and because we feel that a lot in our adult lives. But at least we have kind of, well, we do have the illusion of having control, right? And when you're a kid, you don't. You don't even have that. Yeah, you just have to play. You have to play by the rules. Yeah, you have to do, and you have to play along. Yeah, and to follow whatever instructions you're given by your family, your parents, your teachers, etc. So yeah, very it was a very interesting experience, you know, to be that little 6-year-old kid again, and it was full of very emotional moments. And I'll tell you, I was even, you know, I was retelling kind of the story to you, my husband, who hasn't read it. But when I was telling him that, thinking of, getting ready for this chat of ours, and I was like, this story, and like, this is shortly what it is about. And by the end, the emotional scene at the end, I had tears in my eyes. I mean, I've read it twice. I'm not reading it right now. I'm actually retelling it.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it still gets me,
Yeah.
And I have goosebumps, and I feel like crying, and I look at my husband, and I totally see that he got
Wow.
emotional also, from my brief retelling of that. Yeah, that just once again to compliment you as a writer.
I appreciate it so much. I don't even have words. And really just to hear like how it affects you, and how that story can just resonate with people across the world and different experiences. It is this story of family, and as you said, family dynamics and how things change. And I do think there's something that's going to hit home for everyone in this story.
Absolutely, I'm sure of that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I do want to make sure that we take some time to recognize you as well, because Elena is an author that I also admire. I've absolutely loved your Dream Tamer Chronicles. It is no, so we'll talk about this specifically. As a female women's fiction writer, I see so many themes of women's fiction in your stories, and that is what I am most drawn to. But how would you describe your genre? Like, what can people expect in your books?
It is, yeah, it's actually very hard to describe, because I do think that it's very cross-genre. Yeah, it is fantasy, yeah, but well, fantasy has so many subgenres, yeah, and when I was starting out, I was like, that's magical realism, yeah, for sure, definitely, that's magical realism. Then I do some more research, I'm like, maybe it's urban fantasy, and then I see that the way that people see urban fantasy now, no, it doesn't really fit the urban fantasy tropes, that readers expect right now for my books, because we're talking about traveling to different worlds and realms through your dreams. Yeah, there's no magic as such. There's no magic spells. There's no witches. There's no wizards.
Exactly.
There's no crystal balls. No dragons. No castles. No, there. But there is magic that is actually being able to leave the reality that surrounds you, that you view as the one and only reality. Yeah. Once you close your eyes and go to sleep, and then you realize that there's so much more to this universe, and you could go anywhere else, and which isn't always like fun and friendly and safe, but it's always fascinating. Yeah. And while you go on that journey, you learn something about yourself. Yeah, I'm talking about my main character now, because yeah, that is the main theme of that is Tina's coping with grief. She's a widow. She's coping with grief, and when she's given the chance to see her late husband in the other realms, she has to make a decision. This book is about letting go. Basically, this book is about letting go, and this book is about that you have at some point take a decision of you either look forward to a path to a future, yeah, and you have to move on, yeah, even considering that some things happened in your life that you didn't expect to happen, you didn't want to happen. It's terribly unfair, but it is the way it is, and you just have to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Or you keep looking back, and your life will never be the same. Well, it won't be the same in any situation, really. But yeah, I see what you're saying about the women's fiction, because I am a fan of the genre, and I really also want to try myself in that genre, like without the fantasy elements, but like, like pure women's fiction. So I would say that is definitely on my plan of my development, growth as a writer. That would be one of the avenues I want to.
Oh, I love that. Because to me, you're already doing it. I mean, what is at the core of a women's fiction novel? It's a woman on a journey of self-discovery. It's exactly what Tina's doing. That's exactly what Alice is doing. I mean, yeah. So, of course, you have these other elements that I do think define it a bit more. But, oh, I'm so excited. And the third book is coming out really soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's a little bit different, but I absolutely love this story, and I think it turned out so good. And it's the final part of the trilogy. So I hope that I provide, the closure, the ending that all the readers were expecting. And I already miss my characters terribly. I really can't believe it's really over, but yeah, it's a wonderful story. So like in the first book, Tina was the main character, and we have her amazing supportive friends. Yeah, we have her Alice as a mentor and friend, but Tina is really like the star of the show, basically. And then in book 2, you kind of have two stories. You have Tina's story, but the main story is Alice's story, yeah, because we're seeing what she went through in the past and how Tina has to save her now. Now, book 3 is focusing on Kate and Tina, and they both will get some kind of a closure at the end. Again, I don't want to really spoil anything, but yeah, so they're all different, and but they're all about, like you said, each of these women's journey. They have a lot in common, but they're also very different. And we see how they grow, and we see what the decisions they make, and we see how what they decide to do in their life, basically, given these circumstances, given the chances and the opportunities that they are given by those other worlds and realms.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me to read these stories as well. And you literally had me like going into my own dreams and thinking like, oh, did that mean something? Was that this world? Like after reading these stories, you're questioning your own life and your own experiences, and it could be more magical than we think it is. I love that.
Yeah. I always think that about dreams. They've always meant a lot to me. And that's why actually I wrote the Dream Tamer Chronicles, because I still believe that dreams are not just dreams. There's much more to it. It's just that we don't really know. Well,
well, before we go, where can people find your books? Where can they find your other content, like your new podcast?
Yeah, I started a podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, by the way, for listening, for being one of my first listeners. It was a big step for me, because I am, I think you can tell I'm nervous now. Yeah, I'm pretty conscious about, like the way I sound and I look, and I'm not very, I don't appear much on interviews, like, lives, and having a podcast and just talking all the time to people, that doesn't really come that naturally to me, but I really enjoyed it, because I just wanted to share my story, how I came to writing, how I started writing, how I am writing, and what I write about, and how books are changing, I think, my life and other people's lives. So I want to talk about writing, and I want to talk about books, and I hope to maybe encourage someone who also wants to start that journey. Maybe someone who always wanted to start writing a book, but they don't have the courage, they don't have an idea of where to start, what to do, and maybe my insights and maybe my experiences, they can help someone, and that would make me really happy, because I really just want to help someone, to motivate them and encourage them. So my podcast is called Dreams, obviously. Dreams, Books, and Miracles, and it's on Spotify. I believe it should be on Google Podcasts already also, but I had to kind of like edit there manually. I'm not very, tech savvy. I'm not very good at that. I'm just learning, so I hope it's there, but it's definitely on Spotify, so you can go and listen there. And yeah, I can even show my beautiful
They are.
books.
These are some of the most beautiful covers.
I can't wait to hold the third one. I will be so happy. So yeah, the Dream Tamer Chronicles, these pretty covers, they're available on Amazon as ebooks and paperbacks. Don't have hardcovers yet, and they're still on Kindle Unlimited also. I was contemplating taking them down of Kindle Unlimited, but I'm not doing that yet. So you can even read them for free on Kindle Unlimited. So if you just look for Dream Tamer Chronicles, Elena Carter, I'm sure. Yeah.
Excellent.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Elena, so much. This has been just amazing for me, and I hope that new readers are excited to discover these stories. And yeah, just to hear you talking about Grandad, it makes me want to reread the story, which as an author, I know like we read these stories so many times, we get to the end, we're like, I'm like, I've had enough of this. But yeah, you've inspired me to want to pick it up again and rediscover all those emotions. So thank you.
As a reader, that's the trick. You have to turn off your writer and your editor. You have to turn off your internal writer. You have to become a reader and then re-experience those emotions once again. I'm really excited for this re-release, and I'm really happy that you decided to do it that way, because wish you massive success with them. And they are amazing stories, and most definitely each one actually deserves their own spotlight. So I think that was a brilliant decision, and I hope you will find lots and lots and lots of readers that agree with me.
And I think you're absolutely right. There's so many different stories, so many different characters, that I think it'll be exciting to really give them each their spotlight. And this has been amazing to do so, to start off with Grandad. So I'll remind everyone, you can get this one for free. Grandad is available for everyone. So go ahead and sign up on DannyJNorwell.com/free novella. You can find it in my stories and bio. And just thank you again, Elena, for your kind words and for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good weekend.